On stage our very own Ruth Ikegah.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you all again. I kind of like attention, so I feel you all can come forward or pay attention. So I want you to look at this. Who can recognize this? If you're on Twitter, you'd have seen this tweet. It was viral, it was everywhere. Everybody could relate because all your superstars were there. When this, I think it went out in January, and I could relate so much to it because the superstars that were listed in these tweets, when they made their tweets, they were not stars. So I could relate so much with it. Okay, so sorry for that, my nails. So today I'm going to be talking to you about consistency and strategy, and I'm going to be sharing my story, how I emerged a star. So meet me, I'm Ruth Ikegah, and I'm an open source advocate. I talk about open source a lot, and I'm a technical writer, and I'm also a GitHub Star. So today, as I talk about myself, I want you to define your story in this moment. So I want to talk about me, my journey from being a microbiologist, or I never practiced microbiology though, but from being a graduate to where I am today. So how did this start? In 2020, I started coding in Python. I was trying to get into data science. And after I started coding in Python, that was like 3 months after, I was looking forward to starting open source. And I have a friend who is a designer that when we were in school, she was so passionate about open source. And she told me open source is volunteering, but in tech. I was like, okay, cool. This is something I want to do, right? Because then I was big on social volunteering. I used to go for events, volunteer, donate blood and all that stuff. And I was, okay, this looks like something I would love to try when I start tech. And yeah, when I started tech, I came back to her, and her name is P. She's one of the awesome organizers of this event. Shout out to Perry. So I started looking for projects I would contribute to. And I found WOSCA. So WOSCA here means Women of Open Source Community Africa. So WOSCA is an initiative from Open Source Community Africa and She Code Africa. So they came together and they wanted to bridge the gap for women in open source in Africa. And they brought about this program to challenge women to contribute to open source. And that was the start of my journey to open source. So I found the WOSCA. You can see this tweet. I made this tweet, if you can see the date correctly, I made this tweet June 20th, 2020. So this was like a workshop to launch the program. And thank you to the facilitators, Ada, Favor, and Zainab, because I made the tweet, and you can see I just added my name to a repository. And the tweet got so many engagements, got like over 202 engagements with so many persons congratulating me, welcome to open source, because that was like my first contribution. So She Code Africa and Open Source Community Africa, they launched this challenge. So it was, if you're familiar, how many persons are familiar with OSCAFEST? Cool. So this was similar to OSCAFEST. In the month of July 2020, women contribute to open source. At the end of July, if you have some pull request, we are going to give you something. And that time it was like a domain name. And I was so eager to get a domain name because I wanted to create my own website. So as eager as I was, I started hunting down for communities, or like a bounty hunt. I was hunting for communities that I would join, to get those pull requests and get that domain name. So these are the communities I joined. One is Gnome Foundation. And at that time, I joined a team called Scalable Onboarding Team, and we were focused on, trying to smoothen the beginner experience in the Gnome Foundation. It was so horrible then for like a beginner to get started. Their documentation is so much. So at that time when I joined the Gnome Foundation, we're trying to smoothen beginner experience, right? Then the next community, so it happens like a loop. You join one and then you find another one. Because when I was in the Gnome Foundation, Shri told me about the Chaos project, which I contributed to. And at Chaos, we create community metrics to define open source health, right? And then also layer 5, it's a service mesh community. And I was also focused on getting beginners involved, improving onboarding experience. So now, I experienced a problem, right? I was 3 months, like I said, I was 3 months into starting my career in tech. So I basically did not know anything. And I experienced that it was very hard, or it's very hard for beginners to find open source projects to contribute to. Who can relate to that? Yeah, this is a problem we can all relate to. I was like, okay, this is something I experienced. And at this point, I wanted to make it better because I felt pain while I was contributing. I don't want to go through all my Git stories where I would, fork a pull request, fork a repository, and then I would delete it over and over again just to contribute, just add something in their documentation, right? It was frustrating for me. Nobody was there to guide me through the process. So I said, okay, I want to push for this. I want to make beginner experience smoother while I go ahead. So what was the plan like? What did I want to do? Like how this West strategy comes in? Because I knew it was a problem and everybody could relate. I think at that time I made a tweet and I did like a survey and so many persons could relate that they couldn't find open source projects. So I was like, okay, so I need a plan. So that's where strategy comes in. So first thing I did was I knew I needed to create and participate. I needed to be the forerunner basically, right? In those communities I mentioned, I'm highlighting those communities, right? I needed to create beginner focus program. What does this involve? I needed to advocate for beginner friendly issues to be created, right? Sometimes when you go to a project, you go to the GitHub repository, check the issues. You are seeing so many things you cannot even do, right? And they are so technical. So I needed to advocate for that cause. Okay, at this project, we need to create issues that are beginner-friendly. We need to try to onboard beginners better. So I started doing that. I started creating these programs within those communities I joined. And then I moved on to one-on-one interactions. So I'm the kind of person that if you want to teach me something, I prefer you show me, right? And because I prefer you show me, that's how I treat every other person, right? I value one-on-one interactions a lot. So I started, being responsive to people that reach out to me that want to get started in open source. Conducting workshops. I also said, I think I conducted 2 workshops. One was last year and one was in 2020. Conducting workshops to get people involved in open source. And if you're here yesterday, I gave a workshop on how to create open source projects, right? So I started conducting workshops, to get people involved in open source, to get them to their first pull request. Because the thing with open source is that when you give the first pull request, it gets easier. So if you're able to move someone from not knowing anything to their first pull request, it's easier for them, right? So I started conducting workshops, and I started using social media to, if you go to my Twitter bio, I think my header photo is open source fangirl, right? So I started using social media. So everything I would talk about on social media mostly is around open source, aside posting beautiful pictures of myself. So yeah, I would talk about open source with my social media and interact with people, and through tweeting about these things, people have, reached out to me to help them with their frustration with open source. Speaking engagements, right? I started applying to conferences. At that time in 2020, I applied to my first conference. I think I spoke at this OSI event, a lightning talk, and it was really awesome. And from there, I started applying to speak at events and advocate for beginners. Tell them, yeah, beginners need to come in, right? They are frustrated, right? They need to contribute more. And if at each of these points I've mentioned, I consistently showed up, right? There were times where I didn't want to do it, trust me. There were times where I was frustrated, either with resources, not having resources, but I consistently, the key word there is consistency, showing up. I consistently showed up in this area, sharing my journey publicly. So if I was doing things on my own, which public learning helps a lot, if I was doing things on my own, I don't think I'll be here at this point. So I kept sharing even though I was not sure about it, I'll still share it and get other views, because then you get people to contribute to the idea. So yeah, I learned lessons. There were lessons along the way that I could pick up. So you would agree with this, that people need a hand to hold them. Like I told you, I'm the kind of person that wants you to do a one-on-one interaction if you want to show me something. So I found out that people just need that helping hand. They need you to help them go from, they would prefer if you help them one-on-one, go from this point, not knowing anything, to their first pull request. So I found out that people need that hand to hold them through the beginning phase. Consistency has its rewards, right? Like I said, I consistently showed up in these areas, and it helped me improve technically, right? From giving virtual talks, I'm standing here giving my first keynote, which I have improved technically over 2 years. So public learning, putting yourself out there, it's quite scary, I know, right? You're bothered. This thing I'm tweeting, is it correct? Right? Will people listen to me? Will people, say I'm saying rubbish? There are sometimes people will do that. People will even go further, come into your DM to say those things. But you should focus on the positive side of things, right? Because you get to learn better. You get to build your network. I've met so many persons at OSCAFEST today that I have been interacting on social media, and it's awesome. So you get to build your network, and network brings you opportunities. You get more opportunities. So this is the interesting part. So I want to talk about what this strategy and consistency has gotten me over 2 years. So I want you to look at the dates. So that's 2020, right? I started coding March, and in 8 months, I was awarded a GitHub Star. And I didn't know at that point that I was the first female from Africa to be awarded that recognition. And it was so good because I found myself in the midst of people that were 10 years in their career. Right? And that made me feel so loved and welcome. And how did this come about? People saw what I was doing, right? They saw me putting myself out there. They saw the energy that came with it, and they nominated me to be this. When I became a GitHub Star, I asked one of the someone in DevRel team. So what was it about my application that was interesting? She told me that they were so surprised the short time I was able to accomplish all these things, right? They were so surprised at the short time. And what was the magic to short time? It was just consistency and constantly showing up and making sure I had a strategy to move forward. And also, GitHub Stars, like you get to renew it every year. And I was also awarded a GitHub Star in 2022, so I'm still a GitHub Star. And it did not end there. Last year, towards the end of last year, so we have, GitHub Stars have this event at the end of the year where we do it's called GitHub Nova, and it's like a conference for just GitHub Stars and the GitHub team. We get to meet them. There are a lot of talks and all that stuff. So during that event, I got an award. And this is the third one. So Pioneer is someone, the first person to do this, right? I've been helping the GitHub team host the GitHub virtual meetup every month, and I started doing that after I became a GitHub Star. So I had this award, Pioneer GitHub Star of the Year, last year. So paid open source projects. So I've had my own share of the dollars in open source, right? So last year, I joined a team to audit the Chaos project. Like I said, in Chaos, we create community metrics for open source community metrics to help guide the health of open source. So I joined this team that was funded by the foundation last year, and luckily we're funded again this year to continue the work for like 2 years. So I've had my own share of dollars too. So talking about this, it's exciting, but I have something for every part of the audience today. For new contributors, you can do big things from a small place. Let me give you an example. So sometime, I think that was last month, my friend asked me about my old laptop. I was like, I gave it to my brother, and he was like, you gave that thing out? That thing is supposed to be like an artifact. So with my not high-spec laptop, I was able to do a lot of things when I started. Right? If you see my laptop when I started in 2020, that laptop is so heavy. Right? And it was, so you can, I believe so much that you can do big things. You don't have to, you don't need, not like you don't need a MacBook though, but you can do big things from your small corner. You can do big things. You can fly the world from wherever you are. That's what open source gives to you. So I want you to remember always that you can do big things from a small place, and I'm rooting for you. For experienced contributors, our seniors, the mentors, you can be empathetic. Put yourself in a new contributor's shoes. When you're showing them how to do something, basically put yourself in their shoes, right? You were once a new contributor, so please apply empathy. Try to provide help. When you see someone struggling, try to just few minutes of your time, it can make that person's day literally. I've had scenarios where I've helped somebody do a very little thing, and the person is thanking you, and you're like, it's just small thing I help you do now, how far? So, but then you can provide help, and that help goes a long way. For organizations, I want them to look at me. They are not looking. Okay? For organizations, it's not just funding OSCAFEST, right? You can support programs. I told you about the WOSCA initiative, right? There are so many other open source programs that have been coming up here from Africa. There's Contributon by She Code Africa. You can support these programs. It's not just when you need a booth, but you can support these programs by funding them. Right? Reach out to OSCAR, support these programs, because these programs help people get started, give them resources and all that stuff. So what am I currently doing now? I made these tweets, I think that was December. I think I was doing reflections then. So Open Source Community Africa, they've done a very good job at, evangelizing open source. They've done a very good job over the years. You won't, I think 5 years ago, many people might not be sitting here listening to open source, come and contribute for free, for what? When I have my 9 to 5. But they've done a very good job at talking about open source, and people are interested. So I feel the next thing that we want to do here is support Africans to build more open source projects. The likes of Danfo.js, how many of you know Danfo.js? Shout out to Rising. How many of you know Chakra UI? He gave a keynote today. Chakra UI hit 1 million downloads. I think recently they gave a tweet where they hit 1 million. That's success, right? Many people are using Chakra UI. Many people are using Danfo.js. So we need more of that. So I am dreaming again. Remember my first tweet? Tweet it into existence, right? So I'm dreaming again to support and empower developers, designers, product managers from Africa to build open source projects that the world will rely on. And yes, it's a big dream, but I believe it's going to happen. And not just me. I need everyone to, volunteer their effort for that initiative. And if you want to reach out to me to push this forward, I'm happy to talk with you, and we'll plan as well. So this is my Hall of Fame. These persons they've supported me from the start of my journey to this moment. They've been there, they've answered all my silly questions. they've mentored me. They've been peers. They've been friends. They've listened to me when it was so tough, right? And I appreciate every one of them. Like, they are my heroes, right? And I won't be standing here today. Like, I won't be here if they did not give a helping hand to me, if they did not answer my question. So if you are close to them, please squeeze like 2K. I mean dollars, of course. Please squeeze 2K into their hand. Yeah, and I love them so much. So I believe the heart of open source is collaboration. That's what sparks it for me, because you can come together with your little idea. 3-4 people can come together and do something amazing, something awesome, and you see how beautiful it looks, right? So that's it for me, collaboration. And as Oscar would say, the future is what? So thank you so much for listening to my talk. Thank you for sharing these special moments with me. You can reach out to me at Ikegah Ruth on Twitter, and you can email me as well. Thank you very much.